In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent.
It's time to recognize that we've come to a turning point. We're threatened with an economic calamity of tremendous proportions, and the old business-as-usual treatment can't save us. Together, we must chart a different course. We must increase productivity. That means making it possible for industry to modernize and make use of the technology which we ourselves invented. That means putting Americans back to work, and that means, above all, bringing government spending back within government revenues, which is the only way, together with increased productivity, that we can reduce and, yes, eliminate inflation.
The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
Hey, hello. Welcome back to Inform America. My name's Rich Merritt, your host. A couple things before we get started. I'd like to ask you to check out the Boston Broadside. Good newspaper. They tell the truth. Can I say more than that? They tell the truth. They give you honest reporting. Secondly, go to the nationallibertyalliance.org and help them out. I believe they're on the right track. They're trying to restore the rule of law in America, and it's the only way it's going to be accomplished is if the people get behind them. It's a simple matter. If the people don't get behind them, it's not going to happen. If the people do get behind them, I won't say it will happen, but there's a chance. It's up to you. It's your law. Thirdly, I'd like to ask you to check out my book, Stand Your Ground. And as I do every week, I like to encourage people, stand your ground. Push back when things are not right for you. When the government's asking you to do things that just aren't right, push back. Politely, nicely, but push back. It's your right. Protect them. All right, now getting into the show. Oh, I just wanted to mention one other thing because it's very important. It's important to me. Last week on November 6th show, I took a 6-minute video and put it into our show. I took it down from YouTube and put it back up again on YouTube. And they're claiming copyright claim, and they're not allowing it to go on the air. So they blocked my show for last week, which I'm a little angry about because it's not copyright infringement of anything. How can you infringe upon a copyright that isn't theirs? They didn't make this video. It was put up on YouTube by someone else, just like all the videos we do here. They're trying to block conservative voices. So they did it to me. It's my turn, I guess. All right, now to get on with the show. I have a co-host or a guest today, however you want to look at it, Dr. Valerie Fraser. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you. Good
She's
to be here.
also a registered nurse and a two-term legislator here. So I believe she brings a wealth of information to the table. Listen, pay attention, and you learn something.
I'm also a veterinarian, and my special interest is homeopathy. That's not what we're going to talk about today, but just to let you know that I have a kind of a broad experience of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I know that you have an extensive background, but I probably wouldn't remember it all if you told me, so I apologize for that.
No, that's quite fine, yeah.
Well, you have a wealth of information, and I welcome you here. So
well, thank you. It's good to
for
be here,
coming.
and it's good to have a voice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's good to have it not silenced like YouTube did last week, too.
Yes, I've noticed that pattern on YouTube, that there's quite a few complaints from YouTubers that they're being silenced or shadow banned, or that's what they call it, or non-monetized, and just being kind of crippled in them having a conservative voice. So it's good to have a conservative voice here in the live free or die state.
I think they changed that. It's just the die state now.
Just live and die.
Yeah.
Well, we have the greatest slogan in the world: "Live free or die," and we need to all take it very seriously.
Well, our forefathers did. A lot of them gave their lives for our
Gen-
freedoms and liberties. It's about time we stood up peacefully and lawfully, but stood up.
General Stark coined that, and I think it's the greatest. Live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils, he said.
No, if you're afraid of dying, well, I won't get into that. Valerie brought it to my attention that there is legislation up at the State House to, I'll say force vaccines on adults, but if I'm wrong about that, you can correct me
we'll get
if
into
you need
that.
to.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
But kind of start with the lead up to that.
Okay, then I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So what I wanted to talk today about was herd immunity. I'm sure all of you have heard, H-E-A-R-D, of herd, H-E-R-D, immunity. And that term really, it's a theory. It's never been proved. It's more likely been proved that it doesn't exist, that there isn't such a thing, in the way that we are taught to believe what that means. What we are taught to believe that means is that if we have 95% vaccine coverage, then we have achieved immunity and we won't get any horrible breakouts from it. But what it really means, and when it was coined, the phrase was coined back in 1933 by a researcher named Hedrick. I think he must have been an immunologist because he actually printed it in 1933 in the American Journal of Epidemiology. So he must have been an epidemiologist. So what he did back in the 1900s is he studied measles patterns. Now that's all he looked at was measles. He didn't look at any other diseases. Now this was between 1900 and 1931 that he did that. So that was pre any vaccines, period, except maybe the smallpox vaccine, which was going out of fashion, and the British government at some point said, well, we've cured smallpox, so we're not going to vaccinate anymore. That was their way of getting around the fact that the smallpox vaccine was killing so many children. So they just said, oh, we've eradicated it, so we're not going to vaccinate anymore for it. And they basically did that, and then up to the 1960s was when they said no more smallpox vaccines. I have one. You probably have the mark, that one you have right here.
On the top of your shoulder, yeah.
Yeah, up in the deltoid muscle. So anyway, what he discovered is that the epidemic of illness only, and this is measles, only occurred when less than 68% of children had developed a natural immunity to it. So he was looking at natural immunity. There were no vaccines, and he was looking at it from like 31 years. 31 years he looked at this. And that's what he coined the phrase herd immunity, that magic number seemed to be 68% of natural immunity. So that meant 68% of the children of that time, from 1900 to 1931, who got the measles or were exposed to it, would be included in that 68%. And so they didn't have any huge measles epidemics from that time because most of the kids, 68%, had measles. I had measles, you had measles, a lot of kids had measles. I'm not that old, though. I wasn't around in 1900. But so that was that was how he coined the phrase herd immunity, H-E-R-D, herd immunity. And it was based upon the principle that children build their own immunity after suffering with or being exposed to the disease of measles. So the herd immunity theory was, in fact, about natural disease processes and nothing to do with vaccination. If 68% of the population were allowed to build their own natural defenses, there would be no raging epidemic. Now, that's proven true in today because when you look at adults, last vaccine I got, unfortunately, was like 25 years ago. It was a flu shot, and I was sick as a dog from that shot. Never had one since. I've had the flu maybe 2-3 times since then. I got over it. I'm not dead. I lived. My kids had measles. My kids had chicken pox. When they talk about the measles outbreaks today, they're not talking about measles deaths. None of these kids have died, maybe a few, that were so immune compromised or so ill to begin with,
Right.
Or possibly vaccinated for measles that it caused their death. But in general, the vast majority of kids that get measles do not die. You keep them home, you give them vitamin A, keep them in the dark so their eyes aren't damaged, and they get over it. So it's really not the death machine that we're led to believe that measles and chickenpox and all these childhood diseases will kill all your children. So let's talk about back to herd immunity. That I don't know if you've heard of Russell Blaylock, MD. He's a
Very familiar with him. Yes.
he's a pediatric neurosurgeon, I believe. Yeah, out of Georgia.
And videos on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah. He's really great. I recommend anybody. He's very entertaining. He's very smart, very Southern. Love it. He's great. He says one of the grand lies of the vaccine program is the concept of herd immunity. And so because what happened was later on, after 1931 and probably after in the 1960s, that the vaccinologists adopted the phrase herd immunity and increased the figure from 68%, which it was originally, to 95%. With no scientific justification, no proof that herd immunity is not just a theory. And then stated that there had to be 95% vaccine coverage to achieve immunity. So that's the big lie. That's the big lie that Blaylock's talking about, is that you have to have 90% vaccine coverage to achieve immunity. They're not talking about natural immunity. Mr. Hedrick back in the 1900s was talking about natural immunity and only about measles. So they kind of morphed it from just measles and natural immunity to all diseases and vaccine-created
But can I interject?
immunity.
I mean, if you're looking at professionals who are talking about this, and they're talking to the layperson like me, I'm not going to understand what they're saying. So are they actually playing upon our ignorance, or are they genuinely trying to come across honestly and have us understand it? Because I'm a little up in the air on that. I don't know if you agree or disagree with either.
I mean, the honesty question, I couldn't answer. I'd have to be speculating on that. But from the, should I say, propaganda or the information that is spread that's incorrect and not backed with scientific proof. This is one simple example or single example of them just taking a phrase, herd immunity, that meant measles only 68% back in the 1900s, to 95% of all vaccines, all diseases have to be given to get immunity. It's never been proven. And we know it's not true, even in areas, and I don't have data with me, but even in areas where they have a 95 or higher % vaccination rate, the children are still getting the diseases they were vaccinated for. So it's really, this is the big argument. There are those who certainly understand or believe that vaccines don't work, and there are those who absolutely believe that they do, and you must have 95% coverage regardless of who's vaccinated or whether they die or have chronic illness because of it or their life expectancy is shortened. Doesn't matter. We have to have that 95%, so that the world doesn't crash and burn because they might get measles or chicken pox. I'm being a little hyperbolic, I think, but
Yeah,
that,
but still-
but that seems to be what it is. If you try to stand back and look at it with a neutral tone and not take one side or the other, but just look at what evidence is presented, it just can't stand on its own. When you really dig into the research and you really look at the if you look at the illnesses out there today in children that we never had when we were in school, kids didn't have asthma, kids didn't have eczema and rashes and you know, bowel disorders, and they just didn't have any of that stuff.
Well, I don't know if this is true or if it's related in any way, let's put it that way, but when I was a small kid, I never heard the term autism.
Me
never
neither.
once. I didn't know what autism was.
I went to nursing school back in the early 70s. That was never a term. We never heard of it.
That's my whole point, is that, and I don't know if vaccines are causing this. I don't know what's causing it. I don't profess to do that, but are you going to do the same thing for the common cold? You know, all these kids, I mean, my grandchildren are all in school, you know, elementary school, and they're running around playing with other kids and everything else. They come home with runny noses, conjunctivitis, God knows what. And that's just natural. I mean, what are you going to do about it?
The childhood diseases are a way that the immune system functions, and this is
Right.
the other really sticking point, is the immune system is far more complicated. It was created by God. God was our creator. He created the humans, created us, and designed our immune function to work to help us live to be old, you know, to old age. And these interventions that are given to newborn babies, just in my opinion, and I have done a lot of study on this, are not necessary. And we now have a law that was my bill for my two terms in the House, that is, if you look up the RSA, New Hampshire RSA section 141-C, :20-a, and look at paragraph 3, Roman numeral 3, it says, nothing in this section shall require an immunization/vaccination requirement for diseases that are non-communicable. Non-communicable disease means a disease that is not infectious or transmissible from person to person. So specifically, there are 3 right off the top that children do not need and should not have. That's my opinion. Hepatitis B, Gardasil, and tetanus. Those 3, and especially that they're still vaccinating newborns, which are, according to this, are not required to have, certainly by the time they reach school age, they're not required to have hepatitis B, tetanus, or Gardasil. And those 3 and diseases, well, they're not transmissible or communicable in a school setting. They're just not. I mean, even in the state knows it. People, there are teachers who are allowed to have hepatitis B, active hepatitis B, to go to school because they know the kids aren't going to get it from them. These are unvaccinated children. So that's one issue with it. But to try and, there's a lot I want to say about this, but I'm going to try and stay on track with my notes. So if we look at the present day, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, so they are controlling, it's one way to look at it, they are controlling the diseases that we have that are out there. According to them, we are all at a risk of resurgent massive epidemics should the vaccination rate fall below 95%. However, most people have lived for at least 40 years with a large portion of the population having no vaccine protection. That would be you and me. I haven't had a vaccine in 25 years. This is herd immunity, or that is, herd immunity has not existed in this country for many decades, and no resurgent epidemics have occurred. So we as adults who are unvaccinated, basically, because once we get smart enough to realize we don't need it and it hurts and why get it, you know, we haven't come down with measles. We don't come down with hepatitis. We haven't come down with, mumps, with rubella, with herpes, with flu, with meningococcal, with HIBs, with, tetanus. I mean, pretty much everybody has their tetanus shot, but tetanus is a soil organism, by the way. So when you scratch yourself, when you cut yourself with a knife in the kitchen, you're not going to get tetanus from that. Tetanus lives in the soil. And some would argue, but it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Well, I would argue that that's not true. It's in the soil, specifically in the...
I don't get any shots anymore.
Yeah. And so the point to that is, the adult population here in New Hampshire, nobody rushes to the drugstore to get their vaccinations. So we've been living under this failed herd immunity because if herd immunity, according to the CDC, has to be 95% vaccine rate, none of us are vaccinated. I wouldn't even think that our vaccine rate as adults is, I don't know, it's pretty low. I'm sure it's way under 50%. And we don't have any huge epidemics in the adult population of any of this stuff. And so because of this scare tactic by the CDC, there's new legislation. Well, I don't know if that was the exact reason why it's being written, but there is new legislation proposed in New Hampshire that will expand the New Hampshire Vaccine Association to include adult vaccinations. Now I looked at that list, and it's about 11 vaccines, separate vaccines that all are given in a series of 1 or 2 or 3 shots. So that's a lot of injections for an adult to take. Less than children, though. Childhood vaccines, we have these little cards from the Health Freedom New Hampshire group that was started, we founded it maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And we have these little cards that are available that gives you all the data of the vaccine doses for children in the U.S. And in 1988, the amount of dosage was 24, and in 2019, it's 69 by the time they're age 6.
69 vaccines.
69 vaccines. Yeah. No wonder we have chronically ill
I
children.
Remember, well, I don't remember exactly, but I don't think I was vaccinated more than 6 times when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think we had DPT, smallpox. That was it.
I can remember 3 or 4, and I'm assuming I had a couple when I was younger, but I could be wrong about that. I don't know.
It wasn't very many, and
No,
and that brings up the point of the childhood infant mortality statistics. The infant mortality rate, if you look at these are all the industrialized countries, Germany, France, Iceland, Japan, Sweden, China, India, Brazil, all of these big industrialized countries all over the world who vaccinate their children. And that may or may not be a correlation, but it sure looks like that. Walks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck.
Yeah.
So when you have, in the United States, we are number 1 in infant mortality. That means that more babies in the United States die between the age of birth and age of 1 year old, than any other industrialized country in the world. We are number 1 in infant mortality rate, meaning more children die here. The number 1 in the lowest infant mortality rate, meaning the less number of children that die between birth and 1 year, is Iceland. And then everybody else is in between. All the other countries are in between. But the United States is the worst. And we, by the way, we do vaccinate the most. So whether there's a correlation there or not, I can't say. But common sense would say there is.
Yeah, and the only thing I can add to that is the fact that we were vaccinated so little, the baby boomers, I guess you'd call us, compared to today and the advent of all these diseases. I mean, the numbers have risen over the past 50 years. They haven't gone down because of vaccinations. They've come up. Now, you draw your own conclusions because I don't have an answer for you, but I mean, I'm just making that point.
So I can say that regarding measles, the measles vaccine, we're missing a generation of natural immunity. So, like, I had measles when I was a child. I breastfed my daughter. She did get measles. My oldest daughter got measles. My youngest did not. But they were both breastfed. And they got over it. They're fine. So, but now her children, and she was vaccinated, unfortunately, it's before I was waking up to this, but she was vaccinated. Like, she was, she was born in 1987. So she didn't have quite 24 vaccines, but she had quite a load of them. But she seems to be okay. My youngest daughter was born like 19 months later, and she had some problems, but she ended up getting vaccines too. But now the grandchildren. So the question is, are they going to get measles? Because she did breastfeed her children, and so we're hoping that she transmitted enough immunity through the breast milk to them that they will have some natural immunity delivered to them when they were young and their immune system was fresh and new as an infant. And my 12-year-old granddaughter, hi Violet, she has not had measles, and my other youngest granddaughter, Aislinn, who is 9 now, has not had measles. So hopefully they have natural immunity to that. And they haven't been vaccinated either. So,
That's good.
and yes, it's very good. I'm very happy, very proud of their mother. Yay! But so back to the CDC and this adult schedule, and this really bothered me when I found out this information. Our tax dollars here in New Hampshire purchase every available what this bill will do, and expect with the New Hampshire Vaccine Association is they buy every available vaccine that the CDC recommends, every one of them, whether anybody uses them or not. They buy them all, and right now that cost to us taxpayers, which goes into the state budget, is $28.8 million for vaccines. Now,
Are you talking about New Hampshire?
I'm talking about New Hampshire.
Oh, that's a lot.
New Hampshire.
Yeah.
That's just the childhood. Now, if we add all the adult vaccines, which are about 11 on the list that I looked at, what's that going to do? Is that going to double it? If we assume that 28 plus 28 is over $50 million that we, the taxpayers, are paying for the CDC to deliver from the manufacturers to the New Hampshire Vaccine Association, who then I understand turn around and give it for free to all of the agencies that dispense it that we pay for. So we're paying for it up front, and we're paying for it at the drugstore if we get the vaccine.
Well, we pay for everything.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
We got 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to wrap up.
So I just wanted to give, for people interested in more information about this, to contact your show, and then I can help you.
Yeah, I can forward
any
the
questions you have.
information to you, right.
Yeah, he can forward the information to me. And if you're interested in learning about this topic, I mean, we're not being anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine. We're trying to be educating everyone, and we have the Health Freedom New Hampshire, and it's a Facebook group of 1,500 people just in the last 3 years, and we're growing, and we're showing the movie Vaxxed 2. I'll have more information on that if you're interested, which is very, very good. It's a movie where they actually did a unvaccinated, vaccinated kind of anecdotal study between the parents, and it's really an informative. It is a little emotional, but it's a very, very well done movie about that.
Now, if someone wants to be a member, can they contact me and I'll forward that information?
Yes, you can forward
Okay.
that to me.
All right.
Yeah, and then the bill that we would like to kill, this adult vaccine being the language, it expands the New Hampshire Vaccine Association to include adult vaccinations. So that's going to cost us a lot of money.
Mandatory.
Well, I don't know the whole language, but I'm assuming they're going to want to push it. If they're going to pay for them, they're going to want to give them.
Yeah.
And that is LRS 2207 for year 2020. I don't have a House bill number on it yet.
Well, stay active and get involved with that and try to find out about it and then try to cripple it, because I got a funny feeling that it's not good. Thank you, Valerie, for being on the show.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. I'd like to ask all of you out there, stand your ground. Support my book if you would, please, but stand your ground, okay? Push back. We're losing our rights. We're losing our liberties here. Other than that, one little saying that I picked up from Dave Hodges on the Common Sense Show, which I thought was appropriate, so I'm going to say it here. The further away from the Constitution we get, the closer we get to FEMA camps. Think about that. I happen to agree with them on that, so I wanted to say it. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, even though they blocked us. Check us out on Facebook and like us. Go to inform-america.org, our website. Check it out, full of information there. Share it, please. You know, we're all in this together. The more information we have, information is power, so share it. Thank you for watching.